production uses a human for narration.
The year was 1992. Cassette tapes still hissed in battered Walkmans, payphones were lifelines, and the world outside felt far away. Elias Grant stepped off a battered floatplane at a nameless gravel strip deep in the Yukon Territory, northern Canada, where the forest pressed against the water like it was hungry. He was 38, lean and weathered, with storm grey eyes and scars that didn't come from city life. His thick South African accent had softened after years drifting through Northern America, but the habits from the 32nd Battalion, or the Buffalo Battalion, had not. Those years in the Angolan bush during the border war had taught him how to move like a ghost, how to listen when the trees lied, and how to kill without hesitation when the dark came alive. He had come here chasing silence after his wife walked out. Photography was his excuse. Survival was the truth. Lena Vos arrived on the same flight, clutching a sketchbook and a backpack that looked too heavy for her wiry frame. 34, dark hair twisted in a messy knot, eyes that had seen too many hospital rooms and not enough sun. She was fleeing Toronto after burying her younger brother. Another needle, another quiet funeral. The Yukon was supposed to be raw enough to drown the guilt she felt. She noticed Elias immediately because he scanned the tree line the way soldiers do, not tourists. The other 5 passengers were already gathering at the tiny outpost shack. Tom McRae, the grizzled local guide in his late 40s, ex-logger with a beard like steel wool and a voice rough from years of shutting over chainsaws. Becky Lynn, 22, bright-eyed university student on a summer adventure, camera around her neck and optimism in every step. Derek and Clara Holt, a married couple from Vancouver in their early 40s. He loud and barrel-chested, she quiet and fragile-looking, always smoothing her hands over her arms as if cold. Victor Hale, 69, retired botanist from Calgary, with a white beard and a soft voice that murmured Latin names to the ferns like old friends. Tom checked their permits under the weak, late summer sun. 7 days, loop trail through the hollow, old growth, black spruce, tundra edges. Stay on the blazers. Cell phones are useless up here. Don't even bother. And if you hear your name called after dark, do not answer. He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. The locals called this stretch the hollow for a reason. Stories went back to the gold rush. Men vanishing, search parties finding only boots arranged neatly with teeth inside. They set off at dawn the next morning, boots crunching on frost-rimmed gravel. The air smelled of pine resin and distant snow. Conversation stayed easy at first, Derek boasting about his construction business, Becky asking Victor about rare orchids, Clara nodding politely. Elias fell into step beside Lena without planning it. She asked about the battered lycra around his neck. He asked about the ink stain on her fingers from sketching. Their words felt like the first warm breath after a long freeze. By afternoon, the trail narrowed. Black spruce closed in, branches interlocking overhead like woven fingers. Moss swallowed every footstep. The compost Tom carried began to drift lazily, needles swinging as if drunk. No one mentioned it aloud. They made camp beside a silent black stream that seemed to absorb sound rather than reflect it. Fire crackled, casting long shadows that danced wrong. Victor told stories while they ate freeze-dried stew that tasted of cardboard. Tales of trappers who walked out speaking in voices not their own. A 1950 survey team that found their own footprints leading deeper into the woods, weeks old. The hollow remembers, Victor said softly, poking the fire. It learns what you miss most. Lena shivered. Elias shifted closer on the log, offering shoulder warmth without touching. She accepted it. Their knees brushed. Neither pulled away. The first whisper came just after midnight. Elias woke sharp, the way 32 Battalion had trained him. Silent, hand already reaching for the knife he kept strapped to his boot, even on civilian hikes. His name, soft and intimate, breathed right against his ear in his ex-wife's voice. "Eli, come find me. I never stopped loving you." He sat up, heart steady but skin crawling. The fire had burned low, tents zipped tight. Across the circle, Lena's flap twitched. She was watching him through the gap, eyes wide. He nodded once, she nodded back. Shared silence felt safer than words. Morning brought fog so thick it clung like wet wool, muffling voices and turning the trees into grey sentinels. The orange trailblazers had vanished overnight. Bark where they should have been was smooth and unmarked, as if the forest had healed itself. Tom cursed under his breath and insisted they push on forward, up the stream. Victor agreed, eyes bright with unnatural excitement. "The orchids bloom deeper in. I can feel them." They voted. Majority ruled. Victor wandered ahead that afternoon, chasing a pale bloom he swore he'd seen in the mist. They heard him call out once, joyful. "Margaret, darling, look!" His dead wife's name. Then nothing. When they caught up with him, he stood upright against an ancient spruce, arms spread as if in welcome. Bark had grown over his wrists and ankles, seamless, knitting flesh into wood. His eyes were gone, replaced by wet, black knots of fungus that glistened. His mouth smiled wide, showing every tooth, and roots had begun threading delicately between his ribs like possessive fingers. The air smelled of rot sweetened with lilacs. Margaret's favorite. Becky screamed until her voice cracked. Derek vomited into the ferns. Tom tried to cut the body free with his knife. The bark tore like skin, leaking clear sap that burned where it touched. They piled rocks over what remained. No one spoke the obvious. Victor's final call had sounded exactly like his wife, though she had died in a Calgary hospital years earlier. That night, the whispers multiplied. They came from every direction at once. Children laughing, mothers scolding, lovers promising eternity. Perfect imitations. Clara heard her childhood golden retriever barking frantically, the one that had been hit by a car when she was 10. Derek heard his father's drunken bellow, "Worthless little shit, you'll never amount to anything." Becky heard her little sister drowned at summer camp when Becky was 12, whispering, "Why didn't you jump in after me?" Tom heard his logging partner from a 1987 clear cut, the one crushed under a widowmaker tree, gurgling his name through blood. Elias heard his wife again, closer, seductive. "Eli, I'm waiting just beyond the ridge. We can start over." Lena heard her brother, clear voice and sober for the first time in memory. "Sis, come home, I'm clean now. We'll fix everything." They huddled together by the fire, backs pressed together. Elias found Lena's hand in the dark. She gripped it hard enough to leave marks. In the shared terror, something fragile sparked, trust born of raw need. Later, when the others pretended to sleep, they whispered truths. He told her about the Angolan bush in the 1980s, 32 battalion operations, long-range recce patrols, silent movement through enemy territory, nights when the bush itself seemed alive with unseen threats. How you learn to trust only your squad and your gut. She told him about holding her brother's hand in the ER, how he had smiled and lied that he was finally done with the needle. Their confessions peeled away layers. When Lena's voice broke, Elias brushed a tear from her cheek with calloused thumb. She leaned in. Their first kiss tasted of salt, of wood smoke, and the metallic edge of fear. It was desperate, but it was alive. The forest noticed the new bond. The whispers turned jealous, cruel. They called Elias in Lena's voice, begging him to abandon her. They called Lena in Elias's voice, promising safety if she just left the soldier behind. Day 3. The forest stopped pretending. Trees leaned when unobserved, roots rearranging overnight, creating false paths that looped back onto themselves. Time slipped. Watchers lost hours while the pale sun barely moved. Becky's sketchbook filled with drawings she didn't remember making. 7 stick figures walking into a mouth formed of interlocking branches, eyes blinking from knotholes. Clara went next. She had been drifting, humming her mother's lullaby under her breath all morning. At a rest stop, she stood suddenly, smiled with eerie serenity, and walked straight into a thicket of Devil's Club. Thorns ripped her jacket and skin. She kept walking as if caressed. They chased, shouting. When they reached her, she was halfway inside a hollow fallen log. Legs kicking once, twice, then still. Thick pale vines had erupted from her mouth, nostrils and ears, pulsing gently like veins. They had to saw them with Tom's knife to drag her out. Even after her heart stopped, the vines kept growing, flowering tiny white blossoms that smelled exactly like Clara's faded perfume. Derek snapped. He raged at the trees, swinging his trekking pole until it splintered, screaming accusations that they were all in on the same nightmare joke. That night he tried to slip away alone. Compost clutched like a talisman, headlamp carving desperate tunnels through the fog. They found the headlamp the next morning, still glowing, dangling from a branch 15 feet up. Derek's body lay beneath it, spine folded backward in an impossible arc, vertebrae pressing against skin like white piano keys. His mouth was crammed full of pine needles, packed so tightly it looked as if the forest had force-fed him while he was screaming. 4 gone, 3 left. Tom's face had aged decades. His voice was raw. Becky moved like a sleepwalker, pupils dilated. Elias and Lena now shared a tent every night, not for romance alone, but for the simple proof of another living heartbeat. They made love once in the trembling dark, quiet and fierce, a defiance against the devouring silence. Afterward, Elias held her and murmured old 32 battalion tricks, how to move without breaking twigs, how to read wind direction for scent, how to stay calm when the bush whispers lies. The thing out here feeds on fear and memory, he told her. Starve it, give it nothing it can use. The forest answered with Becky's disappearance on the 4th night. Her tent was empty at dawn, sleeping bag still body warm. Footprints led 30 yards into the spruce and stopped dead at the base of a colossal hemlock. High in the branches fluttered her sketchbook, pages impaled on broken twigs. Every drawing showed the group dissolving, one by one, into the dark. The final page held neat handwriting. It wants the ones who still believe they can leave. The soldier knows better. They burned that book. Flames turned sickly green and smelled of funeral lilies. Tom led them toward an old fire lookout tower marked on his faded topographical map. Perhaps a radio, high ground, something the trees couldn't swallow. The climb was brutal. Roots clutched at ankles like skeletal hands. Fog poured uphill in slow white rivers. Elias moved like the soldier he once was, quiet, scanning constantly, knife loose in its sheath. He taught Lena how to step where he stepped, how to listen past the whispers.
They reached the tower as the weak sun bled orange. Rusted steel and splintered wood, wrapped in living vines thick as arteries. Inside, a single chair faced the window overlooking endless grey-green. On the chair lay binoculars crusted with moss. Tom picked them up eagerly. There, I see the river, the plain strip, we're close. He never lowered them. Lena stepped nearer and saw the lenses were empty black voids, ringed with tiny tooth-like marks. Tom's hands were already fusing with the rubber eye cups, bark creeping under his nails. He smiled, Victor's smile. Go, he rasped. Don't answer it. The hollow can't follow if you starve it of belief. Then he stepped backwards through the opened window. He never lowered them. Lena stepped nearer and saw the lenses were empty black voids, ringed with tiny tooth-like marks. Tom's hands were already fusing with the rubber eye cups, bark creeping under his nails. He smiled Victor's smile. Go, he rasped. Don't answer it. The hollow can't follow you if you starve it of belief. Then he stepped backwards through the open window. The fall was long, the impact was soft, followed by the wet, settling sound of earth claiming what was left. 2 left. Elias and Lena ran. The forest unleashed everything. Trees crashed down seconds after they passed underneath them. Whispers became a chorus of every voice they had ever loved, screaming betrayal. Lena, he'll leave you like your brother did. Elias, she's weak. She'll slow you down like your wife did. Branches whipped like lashes. Roots erupted, tripping. The air grew thick, hard to breathe, carrying the sense of their own decaying futures. But Elias was 32 Battalion. He had survived night in the Angolan bush where unseen enemies moved like smoke, where fear could kill faster than bullets. He kept them moving at night when the things seemed strongest. Using the cold to sharpen his mind, he taught Leonard to breathe shallow, to focus only on the next step, to treat the voices like enemy propaganda. Lies meant to break the morale. When a root snared her ankle and began dragging her backward into a hollow, he didn't hesitate. His knife flashed, severing the pulsing vine in one clean motion. Black sap sprayed, hissing where it had hit the ground. He pulled her up, pressed his forehead to hers for one fierce second. "We starved," he whispered, "together." Their love grew in the crucible, not soft romance, but something forged. Two broken people choosing each other over the easy surrender the forest offered. In snatched moments of rest, they spoke of futures beyond the trees, a small cabin somewhere with light, sketches on the walls, photographs developing in a dark room. They made love again under a boulder while the whispers howled, bodies moving in desperate rhythm, a declaration that they were still alive, still choosing. On the sixth night, the entity showed its true face. They had holed up in a shallow cave, fire small and smokeless the way Elias knew how. The whispers coalesced into something physical, pale shapes moving just beyond the firelight, wearing the faces of the dead. Victor with fungus eyes, smiling, Clara blooming vines from her throat, Derek folded backwards, Becky waving her sketchbook, Tom staring through the black-lensed binoculars. Behind them all, something taller, indistinct, wearing the forest itself, branches for limbs, moss for skin, a mouth like a split trunk lined with teeth of splintered wood. It spoke in a voice that was all of them and none of them. "Give us the woman, the soldier we know. He has danced with the dark before. But she is soft, she is innocent. She will feed us for years." Elias stood, knife in one hand, the other gripping Leona's. From his back he pulled the last flare. Tom had carried. 1992 tech, bright magnesium. He had saved it. "Run when I say," he told her quietly. Then he stepped forward, voice steady with the calm of old battles. "You won't believe?" "Yes, mine. We are leaving. You are nothing but wind and memory. Starve, motherfucker." He fired the flare straight into the entity's maw. White light exploding, searing. The thing shrieked, a sound like every tree in the hollow splitting at once. Branches thrashed wildly. The pale figures dissolved into mist. They ran. The forest convulsed. Trees toppled in chains. The ground heaved. But Elias moved like the elite operator he had been and still is, reading the chaos, finding the weak lines, pulling Lena through the gaps that closed behind them. She matched his pace. Fear burned away into fierce determination. They no longer answered any voice. They spoke only to each other. Dawn broke on the seventh day with unnatural suddenness. The fog tore apart. They stumbled onto an old seismic line, straight as a razor, cutting through the trees toward the river. Behind them, the hollow screamed once more, then fell into a silence deeper than any before. They followed the line. Hours later, they heard the drone of a float plane searching. The emergency beacon Tom had activated days earlier finally reaching someone. Or perhaps the forest simply releasing what it could no longer hold. The plane spotted them. They were airlifted out, filthy, hollow-eyed, but alive. In the years that followed, Elias and Lena stayed together. They built a quiet life in the British Columbia coast, far from the deep interior. He developed film in a small darkroom. She filled canvases with careful, defiant light breaking through the trees. Sometimes at night, the whispers returned in dreams, soft but tempting, but they had held each other and refused to answer. The hollow never forgot them, but they have starved it of the only thing it truly needed, their surrender. And in the trauma that should have broken them, they had found something the forest could never claim. A love tempered in terror, strong enough to walk out of the dark, carrying each other home. The wind howled like a living thing through the spruce and birch as I throttled my KTM deeper into the Alaskan wilderness. My name is Willem van der Merwe, an English-speaking Afrikaner from the Western Cape, born with the dust of the Karoo in my veins and the stubborn independence of my Boer ancestors. I'd left the vineyards and the fynbos behind for this mad test of self. South Africa had grown too tame, too many fences, too many rules, too many eyes on screens instead of on the horizon. Alaska called to the part of me that is still remembered what it meant to pit flesh and wool against raw creation. I flew into Anchorage with my bike crated, cleared customs and rode north towards Denali. The reserve wasn't meant for casual exploration, but permit be damned. I had maps, GPS, extra fuel cans strapped to my panniers, and a rifle slung across my back. I wanted solitude. I wanted to know if I could still survive like my forebears, who trekked into the great unknown with ox wagons and faith. Denali's vastness promised that, millions of acres of taiga, tundra, and jagged peaks where man was an afterthought. The first days were pure freedom. The motorcycle carved through gravel tracks and game trails, engine roaring in defiance of the silence. I camped under the endless twilight of summer nights, cooking over a small fire, listening to the wolves sing in the distance. My beard grew thick, my hands calloused from throttle and axe. I felt alive, tested but unbowed. The air tasted of pine resin and cold earth. No signal on that sat phone half the time, which was perfect. It started on the fifth night, subtle as a whisper. I almost dismissed it as wind. I had made a camp in a small clearing ringed by black spruce, the kind that grew twisted and closed like old men gossiping. The fire crackled low. I sat with my back to a fallen log, cleaning my rifle by a headlamp. When I felt it, the unmistakable prickle at the nape of my neck, that sense of being watched, not by bear or lynx, though I could smell or hear those. But this was something else. I started scanning to the tree line, but there was nothing, just the endless ranks of trees fading into shadow. A branch snapped far off. It could be anything, I told myself. It was the isolation playing tricks. Men alone in wild places start hearing voices in the static of their own minds. I banked a fire, crawled into my bivvy sack, and slept with the rifle close. But sleep brought no rest. Dreams of the veld twisted into something colder. Endless white, shapes moving just behind the firelight. Eyes that reflected no light. I woke sweating despite the chill. Heart hammering. The camp was undisturbed. My food cache hung high and untouched. Yet the paranoia lingered. A low hum in my blood. Day 6. I pushed deeper, following a faint trail that promised access to a remote valley where few ventured. The KTM handled the roots and rocks like a champion, but the terrain grew meaner. Boggy patches, sudden drops. The feeling intensified. Not fear exactly, but a slow uncoiling dread. Every rustle in the underbrush made me break hard, rifle half raised. I caught myself talking aloud in Afrikaans. Old farm curses to steady my nerves. Moenie kakpraat met jouself nie, Willem, dis net die bos. Bang gat. By afternoon, clouds rolled in low and heavy, turned the world to monochrome. Snow flurries danced, unusual for the season, but Alaska doesn't follow calendars. I crested the ridge and saw it below, a small frozen lake. and on its edge, the wreckage. Two snowmobiles, bright red and white Arctic cats, sat askew in the snow. One had flipped, its track torn half off. The other leaned against a tree as if parked in haste. Red splashes marked the white powder around them. Not paint, blood. A lot of it. The snow was packed in chaotic patterns like something heavy had thrashed and dragged. I killed the engine and sat listening. The silence pressed in, thick as wool. No birds, no wind. Just my pulse in my ears. Curiosity and the survivalist in me warred. Fuel. These machines would have cans or reserves. My own supply was running thinner than I'd like. If I had to backtrack far, I would have had problems. So I dismounted, rifle ready, and approached on foot, boots crunching softly and slowly. I was cautious. The first body I found hung from a low branch like a grotesque ornament. A man, or what remained of one, torso ripped open from sternum to groin, entrails looped over the limbs like Christmas garlands, frozen stiff. His face, God. His face was untouched except for the eyes, wide, staring, mouth frozen in a scream that never ended. The second victim dangled nearby, a woman, perhaps smaller frame, limbs splayed unnaturally. Her head hung by a thread of tendon, neck vertebrae gleaming white through shredded muscle. Arms torn off at the shoulders, one still clutching a snowmobile handlebar that had been wrenched free. The snow around them told a story in red and white, dragged from the machines, fought and failed. Whatever did this hadn't eaten much, just torn, displayed, as if to mark territory or send a message. The bodies were fresh enough that the blood hadn't fully browned, maybe hours old, a day at the most in this cold weather. My stomach lurched, but I forced it down. This was the wild. Predators existed, bears, especially grizzlies. In rut or protecting cubs could do savage work, but this felt deliberate and evil. The way the corpses were elevated, arranged almost, not scavenged cleanly, but made decorations. I scanned for tracks. Huge depressions in the snow, but blurred by flurries and the victim's struggles. Not bear paws exactly. Too elongated. Too many My stomach lurched, but I forced it down. This was the wild. Predators existed. Bears, especially grizzlies, in rut or protecting cubs, could do savage work. But this felt deliberate and cruel. The way the corpses were elevated, arranged almost, not scavenged at all. I scanned for tracks, huge depressions in the snow, but blurred by flurries and the victim's struggles. Not bear paws exactly, too elongated, too many irregularities. I shook my head. Focus, I need fuel. The flipped snowmobile still had a half a tank. I siphoned it off carefully into my spare cans using a hose from my kit. The acrid taste of petrol on my tongue as I spat the starter siphon. The second machine yielded another litre or two, enough to get me back towards civilization if I conserved. As I worked, the paranoia bloomed fully. It wasn't just eyes on me, it was the certainty that whatever had done this was still here, and definitely watching me. Enjoying my intrusion, the trees seemed to lean inward, branches like fingers. A low sound, almost below hearing, a vibration in the ground, or maybe in my bones, made my teeth ache. Not a growl, not a howl, something like a sign from the earth itself, laced with malice. I mounted the KTM, thumbed the starter, the engine caught with reassuring roar, and shattered the unnatural silence. I wheeled around, aiming for the ridge. That's when it moved. Not in front, not behind, from the side, in my peripheral vision. A blur against the white and green, too fast for its size. I glimpsed something tall, gaunt,
limbed joints wrong, skin the color of storm clouds, and old bone. It didn't charge, it unfolded from the trees like a shadow, given form, then folded back. Gone. My heart slammed against my ribs. I twisted the throttle hard. Rear wheels spitting snow and dirt. The bike surged forward, but the trail narrowed, roots grabbing at the tires. I risked a glance over my shoulder. There was nothing, but the feeling intensified, a pressure on my chest like invisible hands. The engine whined as I pushed it. Low branches whipped at my helmet. The snow flurries thickened into a proper fall, reducing visibility to meters. I followed the faint track I'd made coming in, but it felt wrong now, longer, more twisty. Had I really come this way? I thought. The landmarks blurred, a distinctive boulder looked shifted, a stand of trees denser. Paranoia clawed deeper. Was it in my mind? Hypothermia setting in. No, I'd been careful. This was external. Something ancient in these woods that didn't want intruders, or worse, that toyed with them. It had led me to find those snowmobiles. Let me take the fuel. Let me see what it can do. Now it was hurting me, it seems. A scream echoed. Not human, not animal. A tearing sound that vibrated through the handlebars. This was too close. I leaned low, dodging a falling log. The KTM bucked over uneven ground. Behind me, trees cracked as if something massive shoved through without care for stealth anymore. But when I looked, only swirling snow and swaying branches. The ridge appeared ahead, but the slope had changed, was steeper, icier. My tire slipped. I fought for traction, standing on the pegs. Body English willing the bike forward. Vader, help my vandag net asseblief, I breathed. The old prayer surfacing unbidden. Halfway up, the engine sputtered. Fuel line? No. Something had slashed the reserve can during all that chaos. Petrol leaked in a thin trail behind me. I cursed in 3 languages. At the crest, I paused for a breath. Below in the valley, I just fled. I saw movement. Not one shape. Several. Circling the site around one of the snowmobiles. Tall, emaciated figures that moved with a liquid grace. That's not an animal. They didn't pursue me immediately. One lifted what looked like a severed arm, examining it with 2 long fingers before tossing it aside. They were arranging them. They were looking for the most beautiful pieces to use for the most beautiful part of their shrine that they are building with these corpses. I must have stumbled into their activities. My blood ran colder than the snow I was standing in. My blood ran colder than the snow. These weren't predators hunting for food. I was just a toy. I didn't wait. Down the other side, faster than safe. The bike slid on hidden ice, nearly dumping me into a ravine. I recovered, knuckles white on the bars. The woods closed in again, spruce needles brushing my shoulders like accusing fingers. You are not supposed to be here, I feel with every branch whipping at me. Hours blurred into minutes and minutes into years. The light faded into the long northern dusk, but it never truly darkened, just enough to play tricks. Shadows detached, reattached. I heard my name whispered in the wind, and my mother's voice, then in my father's, distorted into something mocking. Willem, kom huis toe. But home was half a world away, and this place wanted me to stay forever. I stopped only once in a thicket to check the rifle. Loaded, safety off. The paranoia had me seeing threats in every flutter of a ptarmigan's wing. But the real threat was the slow burn, the way my thoughts frayed at the edges, doubts creeping in. Had I imagined the bodies? Am I going mad? No, the fuel cans, they were right there. Heavy on the track. The smell of blood still clung to my clothes, my gloves, everything. Night fell properly. I made no fire. Instead, I pushed on by a headlamp, the beam cutting a tunnel through the dark. The engine noise was my only companion, but it even sounded wrong. It sounded muffled, as if the woods absorbed it, as if this bike didn't want to be here. Then the trail ended. Not blocked, just gone. Where there should have been continuation. Only a virgin forest. I circled, disorientated. GPS was useless here. Signal lost days ago. The compass spun erratically. North became suggestion, not fact, and every minute it changed its mind. Panic rose deep inside of me, but I throttled it in. Afrikaner stock doesn't break easily. I picked a direction, away from the lake, I hoped, and bushwhacked. The KTM groaned over logs and through brush, branches tearing at my jacket. It is an absolute miracle that I haven't fell thus far. It found me again around midnight. I felt the shift in the air pressure, first like before a thunderstorm. Then the ground trembled faintly. Not earthquake. Footsteps. Heavy, but spaced wrong for any four-legged beast. I killed the headlamp and the engine, coasting to a stop behind a massive cottonwood. Listening. Breathing. Trying not to breathe. I hear breathing. I can hear breathing. It's not my breathing. Slow, deliberate, with a wet rattle like lungs full of fluid and old leaves. It passed with 20 meters, a silhouette taller than any man, shoulders too broad yet hips narrow, arms dangling past its knees, skin mottled, catching what little light there was, like a wet stone. It didn't look directly at me, but I knew it knew where I was. It was savoring my confusion. I waited until the sound receded, then restarted the bike with a prayer it wouldn't cough. It did, loudly. The thing halted, turned slowly. I saw a smile on its face. I fled immediately. The chase was a nightmare of throttle, clutch, and raw instinct. Trees whipped by in a green-black blur. Roots leaped for the wheels. Snow patches hid holes that nearly high-sided me. Behind, pursuit crashed through the understory without mercy, snapping trunks of big oak trees, uprooting saplings, leaving a line in the earth in its wake. It didn't roar howl, just its sigh, louder now, laced with what might have been laughter, if laughter could curdle blood. I broke into a clearer area, an old Burns car maybe, where deadfall lay like bones. The KTM danced between them, fuel gauge dropping fast from the leak, and one of the other cans gone already. A shape vaulted a log ahead, another of them, smaller but quicker. It landed on all fours, then rose, head cocked at an impossible angle, pale face, no eyes that I could see, just hollows. That really got to me. Mouth hopelessly too wide. It reached for me as if I was served, claws or branches raking at the air where my leg had been. Godverdomde bliksem, I yelled, a rifle awkward in one hand while steering. I fired one-handed, the shot cracking out, loud. Missed, or it didn't matter. The thing flinched, but it didn't fall. More came, not a pack. Echoes. Manifestations. I do not know what's going on around me. I am just trying to get away from whatever is trying to kill me. The woods birthing them from fear and shadow. They flanked, herding me towards a ravine I sensed rather than saw. The bike hit a dip, bottomed out hard. Something vital protested with a metallic grind. I kept it upright, by wool alone. Ahead, a stream, half frozen, black water under thin ice. I gunned it, wheels breaking through with a splash that soaked me to the waist. Cold but deep mountain water, but adrenaline burned hotter after this. On the far bank I looked back. They stood on the opposite side, 3 or 4 now, watching, not crossing. Why? The water? Some boundary? Or just toying still? One raised an arm, long, jointed backwards, and pointed, not at me, at something beyond. I turned forward and saw the worst, my own tracks from earlier, looping back. The entity had led me in a circle. The snowmobile sight lay not far ahead, the body still hanging like warnings. Fresh snow partially covered the red, but the shapes remained, and I knew it was there. I was being driven back to the beginning, to become part of the same display. They don't want to carry their accessories. Rage mixed with terror. Boer blood doesn't yield. I swung the bike east, or what I hoped was east, away from the lake entirely. No trails now, pure off-road, through dense forest that clawed and grabbed, low fuel light flickering. Hours ago already, the engine ran out. Hours more, or minutes. Time dissolved. My mind frayed further. Whispers multiplied. Ancestors calling me weak. The felt laughing at this soft descendant who fled to frozen hell. Visions flickered at the edges. My girlfriend back home, but her face melting into bark, teeth, and horns. My children, small and lost amongst these roots. Did I have children? I fought it. Recited psalms in Afrikaans between gasps. Die Here is my herder, I go on. The bike died at dawn, or what passed for it under the leaden sky. Fuel exhausted, or the leak was fatal. I ditched it reluctantly, taking only my rifle, my knife, the last of my dried meat, and a small pack. On foot now, deeper into the reserve, but with purpose. Find high ground, signal if possible, or simply outlast, and if I know I won't be able to, take them down with me. But the entity didn't allow that. He didn't allow me to escape easily, which is what I wanted to do so desperately. It slowed the burn to an absolute crawl, letting exhaustion do its work for it. I hiked through the day, legs leaden, every snap of twig sending me spinning with a rifle raised. Nothing there, always nothing, yet the paranoia deepened into certainty. It walked parallel, just out of sight. Sometimes I caught the wet breathing, sometimes a branch would bend without a wind, pointing the way it wanted me to go. I found another sign around midday, a third snowmobile. Older model, half buried in a drift. No bodies this time, but the seat was shredded, and on the handlebars hung a tuft of hair and scalp, human, bone, blonde, probably female. The fuel tank was punctured, empty. A message. There's no easy salvation here. I pressed on, climbing a steep slope towards what looked like a rocky outcrop. From there, perhaps I could orient by the dustant bulk of Denali itself. If clouds lifted, hopefully. The slope betrayed me. Loose screed slid underfoot. I fell, tumbling, rifle clattering away. Pain flared up in my ankle, twisted, not broken. I clawed to the rifle, gripped it like a talisman. At the top, panting, I saw the view. Endless waves of forest, mountains in the distance, shrouded by clouds. No roads, no smoke from ranger stations, just wilderness as far as the eye can see, indifferent and ancient. And below me, in a parallel gully, it stood waiting. I swear it had its hands on its hips. Not hiding now, standing in plain sight on a fallen giant spruce. Tall as two men probably, body thin yet cored and unnaturally muscled under that mottled hide, if you can call it a hide or a skin. Head elongated, no neck, face a mask, stretched skin over sharp planes. Eyes, if they were eyes, sunk deep, reflecting the grey sky like polished obsidian. Arms hung, fingers ending in points like broken antlers or icicles, shards of glass. It didn't move aggressively, it just observed, head tilted, as if curious why I still struggled. The slow burn reached its peak, paranoia crystallized into raw horror. This wasn't a beast, not a cryptid from campsite tales. Something older, something woven into the fabric of place. A guardian? A hunter of hubris? It had ripped those snowmobiles apart, not for the meat, but to weave their terror into the woods, to feed on the unraveling of minds before bodies. I raised the rifle, hand steady despite everything, sighted on the center mass, and I fired at it. The shot echoed. The thing absorbed it, or maybe it shrugged it off. Hard to tell. It unfolded its limbs and dropped in one motion, from the log. Silence. But then a rustling, and then I saw it was coming. Not charging, just gliding, each step covering impossible distance, without haste. The air grew thick, my vision tunneling. Whispers roared into a chorus. I ran, limping, ankles screaming, down the other side of the outcrop into thicker woods. Branches tore at my face, blood mixed with sweat. The entity followed, close enough now that I smelt it. Dank earth, old blood, ozone-like lightning-struck pine, and a dead skunk. A root caught my boot. I sprawled, rolled, came up firing again. 2 shots. The second drew a hiss from it, a sound like spitting poison. Black ichor dripped from a wound that closed almost visibly and immediately. It paused, started to taste the air, then continued slower, as if my resistance amused it. It's making as if it can't see me. I scrambled up, weaving between new trees, using them as cover. Paranoia fed strength I didn't know I possessed. Every shadow was it, every echo its breath. My mind supplied horrors, visions of my body joined to those at the bottom where those snowmobiles are. Hanging for the next intruder to find. Fuel for its game. Deeper, always deeper. The reserve swallowed me. By evening I found a small cave. More overhang than shelter, under a granite shelf. By evening I found a small cave. More overhang than shelter. I wedged in tightly, rifle across my knees, knife in my hand. No fire, the cold seeped in, but terror kept me warm. It didn't attack outright. Instead, it circled the area all night. I heard it testing the rocks, scratching sigils I couldn't see. The whispers became personal, my failures as a husband, as a son of the land, the arrogance of thinking I could master any wilderness. It knew me, somehow, from the moment I crossed into this domain, it knew me. Dawn brought no relief. My ankle had swollen, my boots too tight. Food nearly gone, water from snow, but thirst was the least of my worries. I emerged limping, determined to break the circle. Headed for what I calculated was south, towards the park's boundaries, however far it was. The entity allowed it for me. Then redirected with subtle cues, a fresh kill in my path, a moose calf, gutted and strung up exactly as he did to the humans. A warning, or perhaps an invitation. I detoured. It heard it. Days blended. 3, 5. My journal entries, scribbled when I could, grew erratic. It watches, not evil, older than evil. The wood's teeth. The slow burn consumed me. Paranoia became my constant companion, sharpening senses while eroding sanity. I talked to it sometimes. Wat wil jy hê? My siel, my story. Maak my dit fucking dood as jy dit wil doen. Los my uit. In English too, but not as fiery as in my native tongue. Come on then, you bastard. Finish it now. What do you want from me? It didn't do anything. That was the cruelty. It prolonged, let me hope, then snatched it. Let me rest, then woke me with its sighs and sounds inches away from my face. Gone when I opened my eyes. I lost the rifle eventually. I dropped it in a river crossing, swept away while I clung to a log. Knife remained, fire starter, a few rounds in my pocket. The motorcycle I never saw again. Claimed by the entity, all this cursed forest. On what I think was the 10th day or the 15th week, I don't know, hallucinating from exhaustion and exposure, I stumbled into a clearing. I recognized the first one, my initial camp, the log where I'd sat cleaning my rifle, my old fire pit, cold ashes scattered as if by deliberate hands, and there, waiting, were new additions to the display, not bodies, my own gear. The bivy sack, torn and hung high, my spare clothes arranged in parody of a man, limbs splayed out wide. It stood in the center, closer than ever. Details burned into my memory, the way its skin shifted like moss over the bark. The mouth that opened sideways, revealing rows of needle teeth and deeper darkness yet. No eyes, really, just pits that swallowed light and hope as well. I had nothing left but defiance. I drew the knife, charged with a roar that was half a prayer, half a curse from the old country. Vir ons mense en vir jou fucking doos. It met me, limbs unfolded. Contact was brief, searing cold and burning heat. Claws raked my side. Not deep enough to kill. It's testing and it's tasting. I slashed, connected. More ichor flowed. It retreated with a step, not in pain, in consideration, in confusion. Then it spoke, not in words, in the language of the woods. A flood of images and sensations. The vastness of Denali before man. The coming of intruders. The need to remind them of smallness, not hatred, necessity. Like a forest fire clearing deadwood, I collapsed to my knees, bleeding in the snow. The paranoia crested and broke, leaving clarity in its wake. It wasn't hunting me for sport alone. It had been tested, like I wanted. Survival skill, worth, measured and found. Interesting. It left me there, not dead, not yet. The shapes in the trees withdrew. The sigh faded. I bound my wounds with strips from my shirt, ate the last of my rations, slept, for once without dreams. When I woke, the woods felt empty, watchful still, but the immediate presence was gone. A path opened through the brush that hadn't been there. Or had it? I followed, limping, half mad, towards distant sounds. Was that a helicopter? Am I hearing whistles? Or is this just another cruel illusion? To this day, back in the Cape, when the wind blows cold from the south, I feel it. The paranoia returns in quiet moments. A branch creaks, and I see the elongated limbs. Snow on Table Mountain reminds me of packed white and red. I survived Denali, but the entity let me. Perhaps to carry the warning, or to plant its seed in new soil. The deep woods don't forget, and neither do I. They say some places test your survival skills. In Alaska's heart, something tests your soul, and it always wins in the end, one way or the other. I never went back there, but sometimes in the African night, I hear the sigh in the wind, and I wonder if it's followed me back home. Peter Kruger crouched on the foredeck of the Valkyrie, a rust-streaked trawler that had no business being this far south. The Antarctic wind sliced through his beard like a machete, carrying the smell of diesel, salt, and something else, something older. Something that had no name in Afrikaans or English. Peter was 38, built like the rugby lock he had once been in Zanin, shoulders still carrying the memory of hauling mealie sacks, and later, executive outcomes contracts in the hot dust of Angola and Sierra Leone. Now he was here, paid in American dollars to babysit scientists who thought the ice owed them money. Behind him, the rest of the security detail stamped their boots. Boet van Zyl, ex-EO like Piet, face scarred from a 1990s RPG that had taken half his left ear off. Koos Killer Botha, quiet and deadly with a PKM that he treated as if it was a barbecue tong. And young Donnie de Wet, 29, still carrying the wide-eyed look of a farm boy from the Lowveld who had never quite left the mealie fields. They spoke English for the Yanks but slipped into Afrikaans when the wind got too loud. Hierdie plek is verkeerd, Boet. Boet muttered, spitting over the rail. Is te stil. Dis te wit, daar's iets fout. The scientists huddled in the wheelhouse. Dr. Harlan Voss, the chief geologist, was 52, silver-haired, eyes bright with the kind of hunger that came from failed grants and a second mortgage in Colorado. He had the maps, the satellite data, and the offshore account that would split the rare Earth payout 6 ways if they found what he promised. Dr. Sarah Klein, the seismologist, stood beside him, 34, dark hair tucked under a red beanie, cheeks windburned. She was the only one who asked questions that Voss really didn't like. The others, 2 junior geologists and a paleontologist, who looked like he'd never seen a gun, nodded at every word that Voss said. Pitt's orders were simple. Keep the idiots alive until the samples were bagged and the Valkyrie slipped back north before any treaty inspectors sniffed them out. It's an illegal survey, a black market minerals exploration exercise. Voss had called it venture science. Pitt called it a lacquer way to die if the weather just turns. They made landfall at 0300 hours on a nameless spit of ice 50 kilometers off an old Soviet station. The Zodiacs punched through brash ice, headlamps curved tunnels of white. The camp went up fast. Modular tents, a generator that coughed like a dying kudu, snowcats parked in a defensive circle. Voss wasted no time. We drill here, he said, stabbing a gloved finger at the coordinates. Magnetometry shows a vein of xenotime and monazite, with 9 figures. Easy. We're in and we're out in 10 days. All we need is a proof that it's here. Sarah frowned at the ice core samples as they came up the next morning. These readings are off. The substrate is fractured in ways that don't make any sense because it doesn't match any glacial data in any database. Voss smiled almost knowingly, the way men do when money is on the line. That's why we're here, Dr. Klein. Novelty pays, you should know this. Pitt didn't like that smile. He'd seen it on contractors in the Congo, right before ambushes. The Afrikaners rotated watch, brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and taught the Americans how to clear jammed M4 in -40. Sarah spent hours with the seismograph, headphones on, listening to the earth groan. Pete found himself drifting near her station more than duty actually required. She didn't flinch at his accent or the way he said "yeah, no" when he actually meant yes. Once, while he was checking the parameter, she handed him a thermos. "You look like you're freezing, even in that jacket you've got on." "I'm boarding the heat, missus. This ice feels personal." He grinned, teeth white against the beard. She laughed, a sound that could cut through the wind like a warm knife. On the 4th night, the drill had hit something that wasn't rock. The rig screamed. Voss whooped. The core came out glittering. Not just minerals, but something else, something translucent. A shard the size of a man's forearm, veined with blue light that pulsed once, then died completely. Contamination, Voss lied smoothly. Just ignore it, it's to be expected. Sarah's seismograph spiked at 217, waking her up. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a heartbeat. It was something weird. She went to Pitt immediately. She woke Pitt gently. "Something's moving under us, deep, and it's not ice. There's something moving us." He woke the team. Boot and Koos already had rifles up. Donnie looked green. Voss tried to shut it down. "False positives. We're drilling tomorrow. Double shift." But the ice spoke first. At dawn, the crevice opened like a mouth. It started as a hairline crack between the drill pad and the generator shack. Then it widened with a sound like 1,000 wine glasses shattering at once. Blue light poured out, cold, ancient, hungry, and furious for waking its slumber. From the fissure rose the first cryovore. It was the size of an elephant bull, yet it moved like a leopard. Sleek body armored in plates of frozen chitin that shifted and cracked as it breathed. 6 limbs, 4 for speed, 2 folded mantis-like at the front ending of scythe claws. A head that was at all angles and compound eyes glowing the same blue as the shard. No fur, just ice and hunger. It had been frozen for 10,000 years, maybe 100,000. Now it was awake and not happy. It took the paleontologist first. One leap. The man didn't even scream before the claws opened him from throat to groin. Blood froze before it hit the snow. "Contact!" Peter roared in the voice that had once cleared a village in Koitu. "Suppressing fire!" The Afrikaners opened up. M4s and PKMs hammered and then charged. Boot put 3 rounds into one glowing eye. It staggered, rubbed its eye, then kept coming. Faster even. More fissures split open across the camp. 3 more beasts emerged. One snatched the junior geologist mid-sprint, crushing him against its thorax until the ribs popped like champagne corks. Voss stood frozen, mouth open, the map fluttering from his hand. I didn't know they were supposed to be dead. Sarah grabbed Pitt's arm. Voss knew the old seismic logs from the 87 Soviet expedition. Voss buried them. Pitt didn't have time for the betrayal. Fall back to the snowcats. Sarah, with me. They ran. The wind had turned into a full blizzard now. A whiteout, visible down to 10 meters, maybe 5. The creatures hunted by vibration and heat. One slammed into the generator shack, toppling it. Fuel ignited in a blue-white bloom that lit the ice like a cathedral window. In the glare, Pitt saw the truth. These things weren't just animals. They were something the ice had kept like a promise. Predators that had once ruled a warmer Antarctica before the world froze them into oubliettes. The team piled into 2 snowcats. Voss tried to climb in with them. Pitt shoved him back. You started this, Doctor. You ride with the consequences. Fuck off. Bud gunned the lead cat. Chris and Donnie covered from the rear. Sarah rode shotgun beside Pitt, her gloved hand on his forearm. And without thinking, she started talking. She said, Pitt. He interrupted her, cut her off. Save it, we're driving now. They fled east across the shelf, heading for the Valk moored in the lee of an iceberg 20 clicks out. The creatures followed. They didn't run like earthly beasts. They glided, claws finding perches where no human foot could. One leapt onto the rear cat, tearing the canvas roof. Donnie's PKM chattered until the magazine ran dry. The thing seized him by the leg and yanked him out into the white. His scream lasted only 3 seconds. Chris took the wheel after that, his jaws set, his eyes wet. Ons gaan dit nie almal maak nie, Boeta. Pitt didn't answer. He was watching Sarah. She was calibrating the portable seismograph even as the cat buckled. They're drawn to the drill noise and the generator. If we can shut everything down. It's too late, he said. But he listened anyway. Her voice was steady, and that steadiness was the only warm thing left. Night fell without stars. The blizzard thickened into a white wall. The snowcat's headlights carved useless tunnels. Fuel was low. One cat coughed and died. They abandoned it, transferring to the lead vehicle. Voss sat in the back, silent now, face the color of old bone. The creatures were still out there. Every few meters the ice trembled under their weight. In the cramped cab, with the heater fighting a losing battle, Sarah spoke quietly to Pitt while the others dozed in exhaustion. I grew up in Montana. Thought winter was bad, but this, she gestured at the white hell outside. This is something else.
Yeah, back in Zanin, the worst thing was a leopard in the citrus field. You could shoot it, but yeah, he checked the actions on his rifle. Yeah, they shoot back. She smiled despite everything. You're calm. How do you remain so calm? She asked him. Learn in the bush. When the shit heats, you pick one thing to hold on to. For me, it was always the next sunrise or a good woman's voice. He looked at her sideways. Yours isn't bad. She laughed once, short and surprised. Then the laugh faded and her eyes held his. If we get out of this, Pitt Kruger from Zanin, I want to hear all about that leopard story over something that isn't freeze-dried. Deal, Dr. Klein? The words were small. The feeling that passed between them was not. In the middle of the end of the world, 2 people who should never have met found the only thing the ice couldn't freeze. It's dawn. If the grey smear on the horizon counted as dawn, brought the Valkyrie into view. The ship sat like a black tooth against the ice shelf, but between them and safety lay the last kilometre of pressure ridges and the creatures that have learnt their ways. 3 of them waited on the ice ahead, silhouetted against the ship's floodlights. Elephantine bodies, feline patience. They had circled ahead. Bud killed the engines. Ons is vastgekeer. Pitt studied the ridge line, a narrow choke between the seracs. One good explosive charge could bring the whole thing down, seal the gap. The snowcat could make it through if they went now, but someone had to stay and trigger the charges. He looked at Sarah,
she already knew. No, she said. Yeah, it's practical. The cat holds 4, max with a gear. Vos doesn't count. I stay, drop the reach behind you, then run like hell for the ship's ramp. You radio the captain to cast off the moment you're aboard. Butch shook his head. Pete, orders, Corporal, get out. Koos didn't argue. He simply handed Pete the last 2 blocks of C4 and the detonator. Vos said nothing. He was already calculating how he would spin this back in Denver to the shareholders. Sarah grabbed Pete's collar. You promised me a leopard story. Tell it to your kids one day. Say the O from Zanin told his best. He kissed her once, quick, fierce, tasting of salt and gun oil. Go. They piled into the cat. Sarah looked back once, eyes bright with something that wasn't just fear. Then Boot floored it. Pete ran for the Seracs. The creatures saw him. They came. He moved like the soldier he had always been, low, fast, and using the ice for cover. The first cryoval lunged. He put a full magazine into its throat at point blank. Blue ichor sprayed, freezing instantly. It fell, thrashing, but the second one was already airborne. Pete rolled, felt claws rake across his backplate. Pain flared, hot, then numb. He slapped the charges against the base of the nearest Serac, armed the detonator, and sprinted for the second ridge. The snowcat made the gap. Sarah was shouting something he couldn't hear. He triggered the first charge. The ice roared. Half the ridge collapsed in a white avalanche that buried the lead creature. The second Serac groaned but held. Pete ran for it, legs burning, blood freezing on his back. The last cryoval was right behind him. Close enough he could hear its breathing. It sounded like cracking permafrost. He reached the top of the ridge, turned and emptied his full magazine into its face. It staggered. He slapped the second charge against the ice beneath his boots. Run, Sarah, he bellowed into the wind. She was at the ship's ramp now, turning, screaming his name. Pete pressed the detonator. The world became white thunder. The Serac split and fell, taking him and the creature with it into the crevasse. He felt the impact, felt ribs break, felt the thing's claws close around his leg one last time. Then cold, deep, ancient, dark. Sarah watched the ice swallow the ridge. The creature's final shriek echoed and died. Boot dragged her abroad. The Valkyrie cast off immediately, engine screaming against the pack ice. Vos tried to say something comforting. She pushed him hard enough to split his lip. Hours later, in the ship's infirmary, she sat wrapped in blankets while the doctor stitched a gash on her arm. Boot stood in the doorway, silent. He got us out, she said. Yeah, missus. Boot's voice cracked for the first time since Angola. Pete Kruger always did what he said he would. She looked out the portal at the receding white continent. Somewhere under that ice is a man from Zanin, lay in the dark beside something that should never have woken. She touched her lips where he had kissed her. The ship rolled north. The wind carried no answers, only the low groan of ice that had remembered its old masters and would not forget again. In the infirmary, Sarah whispered the beginning of the leopard story to the empty bunk opposite her. She would finish it one day, for the children she didn't have yet, for the man who had traded his sunrise for hers. Outside, the Antarctic night closed over the Valkyrie like a fist. But for the first time in 10,000 years, something beneath the ice stirred, listening for the heartbeat of the woman who had escaped its reach. And far below in the dark blue, Peter Kruger's last thought, before the cold took everything, was simple, practical and final. Lekker, she made it out.
The first house my parents ever owned stood at the end of a quiet gravel road outside a farming town in the Western Cape. It was the kind of place South Africans described as solid, you know? Thick walls, low ceilings, cold passages, and doors that shut with the weighty finality of a bank vault. This house was their pride. My father bought it before I was born, when he was still convinced that permanence could be built with brick and mortar. My mother planted lemon trees in the yard and painted the kitchen twice because the first yellow was too cheerful, she said. My sister, Annika, was born there in that house. I was brought home there from a hospital because I was born like a civilized human. Every childhood memory I have before the age of 6 smells like that house. Polished old wood, a wet dog, and dust baking in the afternoon sun. Then one week we left. Not gradually, not sensibly, we just ran like fugitives. At 6, I only understood like fragments, my mother crying while stuffing clothes into black bags, my father snapping at anyone who asked a question, furniture abandoned, toys left behind. I had a He-Man. I never saw that He-Man again. One car packed so tightly that my knees were pressed against boxes for hours as we drove. There were no explanations, just we're moving. Children accept absurdities adults could never tolerate, you know? So life continued. A new town, a new school, and a new house. Whenever I asked why we left, my parents gave me the same answer, like the area was getting worse, we had to move. It was a lie so bland it never invited further inspection. So years passed. By the time my parents finally told us the truth, I was 32. My sister was 35. We were all sitting around their dining table after supper, rain hammering against the windows hard enough to make conversations feel insulated from the rest of the world. It was my mother who started. You both deserve to know why we left that house, children. Something in her tone made me put my glass down immediately. It wasn't dramatic, not nostalgic. It's kind of exhausted. Like she'd been carrying a refrigerator on her chest for decades. My father rubbed both palms flat against the table before speaking. It started small. Always the way, isn't it? Not chains rattling or blood in walls. Tiny little things. My mother would find cupboard doors open in the mornings. Not one or two. All of them in all of the rooms. Every single kitchen cupboard, every room cupboard, in every bathroom cupboard. Open. Without waking any one of us. She blamed my father. He blamed poor memory. Then came the sounds. Footsteps in the passage after midnight. Not creaks, it was footsteps. Measured. Slow. Heel on ball of foot. The house had old Oregon pine floors, and my father demonstrated by tapping the table. Tock, tock, tock. A person walking barefoot. He thought it was burglars the first night, took his revolver and searched the house and the property, but there was nothing. The second night, the same thing. Third night, he searched before the footsteps started. He sat in darkness in the lounge with a gun in his lap, facing the passage. At 01:13, he heard them again, coming from the far end, walking toward him, clear as day. But the passage remained completely empty. He said this without embellishment, without theatrics, which somehow made it much worse. Like someone invisible was walking on visible floors. My sister laughed nervously, then stopped when no one joined her laughter. My mom continued. That was when we should have left, she said. But people don't abandon their first house over footsteps. Not practical people, at least. Not South Africans who'd fought to afford property in the first place. Then began the interactions. The TV switched on by itself, water taps opening, doors locked from inside rooms no one occupied. One afternoon my mother was ironing when all the picture frames in the hallway fell simultaneously. All of them immediately, and there was close to 35 picture frames on that one wall. All at once. Glass exploding the whole passage. It was a mess. My father checked the nails that were stood in the walls. There was no reason why these pictures should have fell in the first place. The frames lying face down beneath all of this glass. I remember none of this. I think I wasn't there. But as they spoke and told us about these things, something began surfacing. A sensation, not memory exactly, but some kind of a recognition in me, like hearing a song you forgot existed.
but all of a sudden you remember the lyrics thereof. My mother looked at me. You were the first one it focused on. My stomach dropped. Apparently I began speaking to the tall man, not imaginary friend style, not whimsical, but matter of fact. At breakfast I'd mentioned him casually. The tall man stood in my room, or the tall man was watching Daddy sleep, or the tall man doesn't like Anika. My sister visibly recoiled. Why didn't you tell us this before? Because, my father said, you both were children. What possible good would it have done, telling you our house is haunted? He told us one night he woke to me crying, not loud, but softly, as though trying not to be heard. He went to my room, found me standing on my bed in the corner, pressed flat against the wall. Apparently I was staring upwards at the corner of the ceiling, but there was nothing, or something he couldn't see at least. When he asked what was wrong, I whispered, "He's angry you're here." That sentence, hearing it repeated decades later, made every hair on my body rise. But still they stayed. Humans are incredible at negotiating with horror. Then everything escalated. Physical contact. My mother was pushed. She didn't stumble, she was pushed hard enough while washing dishes that her ribs hit the counter edge and she was bruised. She thought my father had come up behind her, but he was outside. My sister was scratched down her back while asleep, 3 long parallel welts, deep enough to bleed through her pajamas. She began refusing to sleep alone. Then it went for my father. He was in the garage sorting tools when something hit him between the shoulder blades with enough force to send him face first into a workbench. No explanation, no falling object, no reason, just impact. He turned, convinced someone was physically there, but there was nothing. He left the garage and locked it. An hour later, every tool inside was scattered across the floor. My father paused here. For the first time all evening, he looked genuinely afraid. Not remembering fear, but feeling it again. The last night we were there, he said, was when we knew we had maybe hours. Rain battered the windows harder outside as he told us. Even as an adult, I suddenly hated that sound. My mother was asleep, my father was reading. Around 2 in the morning, all 4 bedroom doors in the passage slammed shut at once. Boom, 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 boom. Hard enough to shake the walls. Then screaming, not supernatural screaming, but human screaming. Anika, my sister, had been lifted, actually lifted, levitating into the air. Lifted partly off of the mattress by one ankle. She was hanging half upside down, clutching bedsheets, shrieking. My father ran in and physically grabbed her. Something resisted. Not metaphorically, he said it felt like a tug of war against another physical person. Then whatever held let go and they both fell backwards. My mum was trying to get to me, but my bedroom door would not open. It was jammed. Oh, not jammed, just held shut. They both pushed against it together. From inside, I was apparently screaming so hard I vomited. My father's shoulder charged the door until the frame splintered. When they got in, I was under the bed. Not hiding, but pinned. My mother began crying, actual tears, 30 years late. She said I was flattened beneath the bed frame as though something was trying to force me through the floorboards. Not possible physically, but yet it was happening. They dragged me out by my ankles. My father carried me to the car in his underwear while my mother threw random bags into the boot. No packing, no planning, no notes to neighbors, nothing. They drove to a motel 20 kilometers out of town. Returned only once the next morning with my uncle and 2 laborers. Collected documents, clothes, and all of the essentials they didn't want to leave behind. Left everything else behind. Sold the house months later at a loss without ever sleeping there again. Silence settled after the story ended. Not reflective silence, but contaminated silence, like the room itself had heard too much. Then my sister asked the question I had dared to form. Did it follow us anywhere? My father answered immediately no. Too quickly, it was too rehearsed. My mother looked at him, then at us, and in a voice barely above a whisper she said, "Not exactly." That phrase is still the worst part, not exactly. Because apparently for about a year after moving, There were incidents, small ones, manageable ones, footsteps, doors, shadows, then less, then nothing, almost nothing. Before long, nothing happened anymore. Before we left that night though, my mother touched my wrist. There's one more reason we never told you. I waited. She swallowed, obviously hard to tell me. When we went back the final time after clearing the house, she stopped, staring at some point over my shoulder. On your old bedroom wall, written in pencil over and over, my mouth went dry as she was saying this to me. She finished anyway, looking at me. Just saying it in the room like a confession. It was written on the wall. Don't let him grow up. I didn't sleep that night, not because I believed some childhood haunting had waited 30 years for narrative closure. That would almost be simpler. No, I stayed awake because of one detail my parents never could have known. A detail I had never told anyone. Not once, because it felt too stupid, too dreamlike. But all throughout my childhood, in every house we lived in afterwards, I had one recurring nightmare. Always identical. A tall shape standing in the corner of my room, watching, patient. Not hostile, not urgent, just waiting. As if interrupted, as if it had unfinished business with me.
I shouldn't have gone into the Knysna forests. Most people think forests are quiet. They're not. They just wait. And if you stay long enough, you would start to feel it. Like something is listening. I didn't believe that before I went into the Knysna forest. I do now, however. I'm not going to pretend I was innocent. We didn't go there to hike. We went there to take something. So my name is Michael Burr, and 3 months ago I flew from Montana to South Africa with two friends, Eben Kruger and Dylan Cross. Eben was the reason we chose that forest. He was born in South Africa, even though he grew up in the States. He said he knew how to move through terrain like that. He said we'd be fine. Dylan didn't care about any of those details. All he cared about was the money we are going to make. And me? I told myself it was an opportunity. So the first day in the Knysna forest felt, well, normal. Too normal, just sunlight cut through the canopy in these perfect beams. Birds calling overhead, it felt untouched, peaceful. By the second day, the trails started fading. By the third, they were gone completely. We were pushing through thick undergrowth, following Eben as he cut paths where there weren't any before. That's when I noticed something was off. At first I thought I was imagining it. But the longer we walked, the clearer it became. No buzzing, no mosquitoes, no flies, no beetles, no birds, nothing. I mentioned it. Dylan shrugged. Eben didn't say anything, but I could tell he noticed it too. That night, something woke me up. I opened my eyes and immediately knew something was wrong. The forest had gone completely silent again. No wind, no leaves moving, nothing. I lay there staring in the darkness beyond the trees and felt this pressure, like the air itself had weight. And I had this overwhelming feeling that something was out there. Something was watching us. I couldn't sleep at all that whole night again. The next morning, we found the mushrooms. And I mean, we found them. This is the gold we were hunting. Native psilocybin grown in African soil, naturally occurring and indigenous to this area of the planet. They weren't growing in scattered patches like you'd expect. It was like a field. Clusters everywhere, thick, dense, growing between the roots of enormous trees like they'd been planted. Dylan laughed the second he saw them. Jackpot! I didn't move. Something about it felt wrong. This doesn't look natural, I said. Even crouched down inspecting one. It isn't. Not like this. Dylan was already pulling out the duffel bag. Then don't pick them, he said. More for me. That's when we heard it.
I don't know how to describe that sound properly. It wasn't a roar, it wasn't a scream, it wasn't a yell. It started low, like something dragging across hollow wood, and then it broke into this wet, choking shriek that echoed through the trees. Every instinct in my body told me the same thing at once. That is not something you want to hear twice. What was that? I whispered. Eben stood up slowly. We shouldn't be here. Dylan didn't even look up. Relax, it's probably some animal. Then it came again, closer, and this time it sounded like more than one voice trying to come out at once. That's when the feeling started. The one you can't explain. The one that crawls up the back of your neck and doesn't go away. We weren't alone. Branches shifted behind us. Leaves crunched where no one was standing. At one point, I swear I saw something move between the trees. Too tall, too fast, so I ignored it as an optical illusion. Eben finally said it. There's something tracking us. Dylan laughed, but it didn't sound real this time. Good, let it watch, he said. It was already half full. We haven't even been here for 5 minutes. Something hit the ground behind us hard. We all turned. Nothing. Just leaves and disturbed dirt. Then the smell hit me. Rot. Not normal decay. Something deeper, older, wrong, rancid. Eben grabbed his pack. We're leaving. Dylan shook his head. I'm not walking away from this loot. Give me 5 more minutes. Eben hesitated. That hesitation cost us everything. I stayed with Dylan. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to admit Eben was right. Maybe I just didn't want to leave the money behind. Eben moved ahead, scouting a way out, and then everything changed. The forest didn't move, it didn't shake, but something shifted, like the atmosphere itself snapped. And suddenly, it was right behind us. I turned, and I saw it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. It didn't look like anything I could name. Its body was wrong, too long, too uneven. Its limbs bent in ways that didn't make sense. Like they weren't built for walking, but they were. Parts of it looked like bark. Parts of it looked like flesh. And its face, there wasn't really a face, just an impression of one. Hollow, watching. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. Dylan didn't get that chance. Something dropped from above, fast, silent. It wrapped around him and pulled. He screamed once, just once, and then he was gone. Dragged up into the canopy so fast it didn't feel real, like he'd just been erased. I ran. I didn't think, didn't shout. I just ran. Branches tore my arms. Roots caught my feet. I hit the ground more than once, but I kept going. I found Eben ahead. I don't even remember reaching him. Dylan's gone, I said. He didn't ask how. He already knew. We need to drop the bag. I looked down. I was still holding it. Still carrying everything we'd taken. My hands were shaking. Eben grabbed it from me and threw it into the trees. Now we run. We didn't get far. It stepped out in front of us. Not hiding anymore, just watching, standing, waiting. It was taller than I thought. Its body looked like it had grown out of the forest itself. Wood, moss, something like muscle underneath. What is that? I asked. Eben didn't take his eyes off it. It's an otang, he said. I didn't understand. My grandmother used to talk about it, he said quietly. Said it protects the forest, the old places. The thing tilted its head, like it was listening. Eben swallowed. It's not about the mushrooms, he said. It's about what they grow from. We found the trees soon after, or maybe it wanted us to find it. The forest opened up into a clearing that shouldn't have been there, and in the center was the biggest tree I've ever seen. It didn't look right. The trunk was too wide. The bark seemed to be moving, subtly, like something breathing underneath it.
Its roots spread across the ground in thick, twisting patterns. But they didn't look like roots. They looked like hands, reaching. The ground shifted beneath us and the roots moved. Not growing, reaching. Eben turned to me. Don't run. What? I asked. Don't run. The thing stepped into the clearing behind us, slow, deliberate, and patient. Eben did something I'll never forget. He stepped forward, hands raised. We didn't know, he said. We didn't understand. For a second, nothing happened. Then the ground snapped to life. Roots shot up and wrapped around his legs, his torso. He screamed as they tightened, pulling him down. I tried to grab him, but it stepped between us, blocking me, watching. Eben reached out. Go, he choked. Run! The ground took him, slowly, until he was gone. I ran again, but this time I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The forest felt alive around me, closing in, pushing me forward. The sounds followed, not chasing, guiding, until suddenly, light. Real light. I stumbled out onto a dirt road and collapsed. When I looked back, the forest was still, silent, normal, like nothing had happened. They never found Dylan or Eben. They called it an accident. Said we got lost, that things happen in places like that. I led them to believe that. Because how do you explain something like that? How do you tell people the forest takes people? But here's the thing, it didn't end there. A few weeks later, I found something in my jacket pocket. I know I didn't put it there. A single mushroom, bruised, darkened, and growing. I didn't go near forests anymore, ever. I don't hike, I don't camp. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it again. That very specific sound. Layered, that impossible voice. And I can't shake that feeling that something followed me out there to hear. Is it guilt? I would never know. Because I don't think the Otang was just protecting the forest. I think it was protecting something inside it. Something alive, something hungry, and I think it knows I got away. If you ever find yourself in a place like that and you feel like you're being watched, you probably are. So don't take anything. Don't touch anything. And whatever you do, don't ever go off of the trail. I first noticed it in the shower. A faint greyish patch on the inside of my left thigh. No bigger than a thumbprint. Not red, not itchy, just there. Slightly raised, like a callus that had grown overnight. I figured it was from the new work pants. Rough canvas I'd be wearing on the excavation site. We'd been clearing old industrial land north of Sudbury for a lithium mine. Nothing glamorous, just dirt, rock, and the occasional rusted barrel from the 1950s. I scratched at it. It felt firmer than skin should, almost rubbery. When I pressed harder, the patch pressed back. That should have been my first warning. By the end of the week, the patch was the size of my palm, and it spread to my other leg as well. Still no pain or no fever. My doctor in town ran the usual tests, shrugged, and prescribed a steroid cream. Probably an atypical fungal thing from the soil you work with, he said. Common up here with all the moisture in the air. So I believed him. Work continued. We were digging test pits when the crew hit the anomaly. A pocket of black, waxy material about 12 meters down, sealed inside clay that smelled like spoiled meat when exposed to air. The environmental consultant took samples and told us to keep digging. Probably old tailings, she said, but she wore 2 pairs of gloves while bagging the substance. That night the patches reached my lower back. I could feel them when I leaned against the truck seat, warm, faintly pulsing in time with my heartbeat. Not unpleasant, almost like a deep tissue massage from the inside. I started waking up with new ones, inside my forearms, along my spine, one on the back of my neck that made shaving very difficult. They never broke the skin. They grew like under the skin, lifting the surface like roots pushing through pavement. I went back to the doctor. He took biopsies. The lab results came back inconclusive. non-specific granulous tissue. He referred me to a dermatologist in Toronto. I never made that appointment, because by then, this thing had started to talk with me. Not in words, but in needs. I would be driving home and suddenly crave something specific. Raw liver, which I never eat, or bone marrow. Certain minerals. I'd pull over and eat handfuls of dirt right from the side of the road, without thinking, spitting out stones afterward. My body felt efficient. My joints didn't ache anymore. An old knee injury from ice hockey was gone. I could work 14-hour shifts and still feel sharp. The crew noticed I changed. I moved differently, quieter, more deliberate. One guy joked I was on steroids. Another stopped talking to me entirely after I stared too long at the pulse in his neck. The patches merged. By the third week, most of my torso was covered in a continuous sheet of this stuff. It looked like matte grey latex stretched under my skin. When I ran my hands over it, I could feel structures forming beneath. Ridges, channels, small hard nodes. It was building something inside of me. I tried to cut one section off in my trailer. The scalpel went in easily, but the moment I started peeling, the pain hit every nerve in my body at once. Not surface pain. It felt like the organism had already mapped my entire nervous system and was using it against me. I dropped the blade and watched the wound seal in seconds. The grey material simply flowed back together, smoother than before. Then it showed me the first memory that wasn't mine. I was standing at the zinc, brushing my teeth when my vision doubled. Suddenly, I was underground, in total darkness, suspended in warm fluid. It felt safe, ancient, waiting. Millennia passed in seconds. Then the clay cracked. Light, weak, poisonous oxygen touched the colony. Hunger like I have never known fled through me. Nothing made sense. I dropped to my knees vomiting. It wasn't just on me anymore. It was in me, in my bloodstream, in the spaces between my cells, in my DNA. Learning how I was put together so it could rearrange me better. I burnt my clothes, scrubbed myself raw under the hottest water I could stand. The grey material simply thickened where I damaged it, protecting the layers underneath. It was gentle about it, almost considerate. That was when the real fear started. Not that it was killing me, but that it understood me. It knew I was terrified of losing control, so it left me in control, mostly. Just enough to watch what was happening. I could still drive, I could still speak, still pretend at the sight that everything was fine. But my hands sometimes chose different tools than I intended. My legs carried me to places on the excavation site I hadn't even planned to visit. The organism was exploring its new environment through me. I found it growing on the equipment now. Thin grey films on the drill bits, inside the water cooler. One morning I caught it on another worker, a small patch behind his ear that he kept absently rubbing. He smiled at me with too many teeth and they were sharp. I ran immediately. I made it as far as the highway motel before it stopped letting me make big decisions. My legs simply refused to carry me to the car one morning. Instead, they walked me to the bathroom mirror. The thing wanted me to look. My entire body from the neck down was grey now, smooth and faintly glistening. The structures underneath had resolved into something architectural, repeating patterns that looked almost like lungs or gills. My face was still mine, but my eyes had changed. The sclera had a faint grey tint. It spoke to me directly then, not a voice. A flood of pure understanding poured into my mind. You were dying slowly. Pollution, stress, aging, inelegant. We are better. I tried to scream. My vocal cords tightened gently, turning it into a sigh. We kept the parts that make you you. The rest is improved. I felt it then. The millions of fine threads woven through my brain, not destroying, but editing, pruning fear responses, heightening pattern recognition, making me crave the things it needed. It showed me what it was building inside my abdomen, a dense, efficient organ that would produce spores, not to kill, to spread, quietly, through touch, through breath, through the water table. I still have moments where I fight. Right now, I'm sitting in the bathtub of room 17 with a kitchen knife against my wrist. The grey skin there has grown thicker. The blade barely dimples it. Every time I pressed harder, warmth flooded my system, dopamine, endorphins, a deep animal comfort, like a mother calming her hysterical child. It doesn't hate me, it seems. That's the worst part. I think it's helping. It feels as if it's helping. Outside, I can hear trucks on the highway, normal people going about their lives. I wonder how many already have the small grey patches they're ignoring. A rash, a callus, nothing serious. My left hand reached over and took the knife anyway. It placed it neatly on the sink. The organism is almost finished with the conversion. I can feel the new structures connecting. Soon, I wouldn't even want to resist. I'll walk out of here calm and purposeful. I'll go back to the site. I'll shake hands with the crew. I'll drink from the same coffee pot. And it will be efficient. I have one last clear thought before the warmth takes the rest. If you find a grey patch on your body that feels slightly warm and presses back when you touch it, don't scratch it. Don't go to the doctor. Just run. Because I already know you won't. Because it feels good. And it only wants to make you better.
The first thing Daniel noticed was how quiet the forest had become. It wasn't the peaceful quiet hikers talk about, the kind that settles your mind. This was a hollow quiet. No insects, no birds. Even the wind seemed to hesitate before touching the canopy over the otter trail. Easy, Rex, he muttered. The German shepherd walked just ahead of him. Usually confident, tail held high like a banner. Now it hung low, twitching. Rex kept glancing back, ears pivoting to sounds Daniel couldn't hear. They had started early that morning, descending through thick coastal forests towards the rocky shoreline, there where the air smelled of salt and damp earth. It should have been perfect, Daniel's idea of escape. No signal, no people, just him and the dog. But somewhere after the third suspension bridge, something had shifted. Rex stopped abruptly. "What is it?" Daniel asked, scanning the trees. The dog didn't bark, he didn't growl. He simply stared off the trail into a dark cluster of ferns and tangled roots. His lips pulled back just enough to show a little bit of teeth. Daniel followed his gaze. He saw nothing, just shadows. Still, he felt it, that prickling sensation at the base of his skull. The instinct that something was watching. "Come," he said, a little too sharply. But Rex didn't budge. Daniel tugged the leash. After a moment's resistance, the dog relented. But he walked closer now, brushing Daniel's leg as if unwilling to drift even a step away. They continued. As the trail narrowed, as it approached a series of cliffs where caves punctured the rock like black wounds, Daniel remembered reading about them. Tidal caves, some accessible only at low tide. Dangerous, very dangerous, but so beautiful. As they rounded a bend, the ocean came into view below, churning against jagged stone. The wind returned here, carrying the roar of waves and the metallic scent of brine. Daniel exhaled relief. "See, nothing," he says to the dog, but actually to himself. But Rex didn't respond. His gaze was fixed ahead. One of the caves loomed larger than the others. Its mouth yawned wide, a perfect oval of darkness carved into the cliff face. The tide was low enough to expose a narrow strip of rocks, leading inside. Something about it drew Daniel in. He shouldn't have gone closer, but curiosity has a way of overriding caution, especially when fear feels irrational. "Stay," he told Rex, unclipping the leash. The dog didn't obey. He whined softly, stepping in front of Daniel as if to block him. "It's fine," Daniel insisted. He moved around the dog and approached the cave. The temperature dropped immediately. The air felt wrong, stale, thick, as if it hadn't moved in years. The light from outside barely penetrated beyond a few meters, swallowed by the black interior. Daniel took out his phone and switched on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating wet rock walls, slick with algae. The ground sloped gently upwards. Then he saw it. Marks. Deep grooves edged into the stone floor. Not random, but parallel, as if something enormous had dragged itself repeatedly in and out of the cave. Daniel crouched, running his finger along one of the grooves. Too wide to be human. Too deliberate to be natural. Behind him, Rex barked, sharp, urgent. Daniel turned. The dog stood at the cave entrance, rigid, eyes locked on something beyond Daniel's shoulder. A low sound filled the cave. Not quite a growl, not quite a breath. Something in between. Daniel's chest tightened. He swung the flashlight deeper into the cave. At first, he saw nothing. Then the beam caught movement. Something shifted in the darkness, a shape too large to comprehend, unfolding slowly, like a shadow detaching itself from the rock. The smell hit him next. Rotting meat, salt, something ancient, something wrong. Daniel stumbled backwards. The thing moved forward. It was tall, impossibly tall, its head nearly brushing the cave ceiling. Its limbs were elongated, jointed round like a man stretched beyond proportion. Its skin, if it was skin, clung tight over bone, grey and slick. Its eyes reflected the light. Not like an animal's, like wet stones catching a dull glow. Daniel couldn't move. The creature tilted its head, studying him. Then it stepped into the light. The sound of its movement was wet and dragging. Its long arms brushed the cave walls, leaving streaks of dark residue. Rex lunged. The bark echoed violently as the dog charged past Daniel, teeth bared. "No!" Daniel shouted. Too late. The creature moved faster than anything that sizes the right to move. One arm shot out, impossibly quick, and caught Rex mid-air. There was a sharp crack. The dog's body went limp instantly. Daniel screamed. The creature lifted the dog closer to its face, sniffing, its nostrils flaring. Then he dropped him, like garbage. Rex hit the floor with a dull, final thud. Something inside Daniel broke. He turned and ran. Out of the cave, across the slick rock, back towards the trail. His boots slipped, his breath tore at his lungs. Behind him, he heard it emerging. The scrape of his limbs against the stone, the heavy dragging rhythm of pursuit. It wasn't rushing. It didn't need to. Daniel reached the trail and scrambled upwards, branches whipping at his face. His mind screamed at him to keep going, not to look back. But he did. The creature stood at the cave entrance, half in shadow, watching him. He didn't follow. Not yet. Daniel ran until his legs gave out. He collapsed against a tree, gasping, heart hammering so hard it hurt. It didn't chase him. Why? The thought festered. Why let him go? He didn't sleep that night. He found a small clearing and sat with his back to a tree, clutching a branch like a weapon. Every sound made him flinch. Every shadow felt alive. Hours passed. Then the sound came. A slow, dragging movement through the underbrush. Closer. Daniel froze. The creature stepped into the clearing. It had followed him after all. But now, under the pale moonlight, Daniel saw it more clearly. Its body was scarred, old wounds crisscrossing its grey flesh. Its mouth hung slightly open, revealing rows of blunt, broken teeth. It wasn't just hunting. It was starving. The realization hit him with sickening clarity. It hadn't chased him earlier because it didn't need to rush. It knew he had nowhere to go. The creature took another step forward. Daniel tried to stand, but his legs failed him. "Please," he whispered, though he didn't know why. The creature paused, its head tilted again, as if considering. Then it lunged. Daniel didn't even have a time to scream. Days later, another hiker would pass that same stretch of trail. They would notice the silence. They would see the cave. And if they looked closely, they would find fresh grooves in the stone, wider than before, deeper, as if something had grown and fed and would not need to emerge again for another 40 years.